Imagine if you have landed on Mars and you look around, you find barren fields, and all of a sudden, an object catches your attention and you want to know what it is. And you want to know if it is living, because that is what you're being there for, to search for any living organisms. So how do you determine if something is living or non-living? And that is what we are going to discuss today. What is the definition of life? And why live? Why live? What is the objective of life? I am Dr. BCMR, Assistant Professor Shastra. Say, if we try to define life, you can look up the literature and we'll find several definitions of life. And it could be something as simple as that is in a thing that hasn't died yet. Or it could be some definitions could be as something that exists. But at the end, from philosophical to science, we have different ways of how we define life. And some of the things that I like, of course, is given here: the condition that distinguishes animals and plants from inorganic matter. This is based on the properties such as growth, reproduction, activities, and several other things. What NASA has come up with is something similar in a different verbatim. Life is a self-sustaining chemical system capable of Darwinian evolution. So let's look a little bit further and try to determine our own definition or purpose of life. As humans, what is the objective of life is little bit different, right? We have so many other things, including we have to get an education, get a job, make money, take care of children, and many other things. We do something that is, we generate more information for human welfare, and that is what is the whole purpose of education. So let's look at what other organisms, including humans, do in a lifetime to define what is the objective of life or what is life, just based on their properties that they do. So metabolism, humans do, so do animals, so do plants, bacteria. Viruses do not have metabolism. They only, upon infecting a host, then they invade the cells, hijack the machinery, and build more copies of them. So as such, they do not have. Similarly, plasmids. Plasmids are double-stranded DNA molecules that live in mostly prokaryotic kingdom. And viroids are infective RNA molecules. They do not have any metabolism. Metabolism is confined to cells, those that are in the cell membranes, delimited from the environment so that chemical reactions can take place. So, yeah, then if it comes to growth, humans grow. We are born as infants and then we grow up. Similarly, most of the animals, plants do grow as well. Bacteria does grow upon division, and then they grow in size and divide again. There is no growth for viruses. They just are assembled within the cell, within the host cell that they have hijacked. Similarly, the same thing is with plasmids and viroids. I hope you notice that viruses consist of either DNA or RNA and proteins, and some of them may also have lipid membrane. Whereas plasmids are purely made up of DNA. Maybe there might be some RNA plasmids, and viroids are all made up of only RNA. So next property is response to stimuli. We respond. Animals do respond. Plants do respond, but their response is much more gradual and not so instantaneous. We have a nervous system to perceive and react immediately. whereas plants take a lot of time, except plants like the touch me not plant, which can show instantaneous movement, and that is why it is one of the favorite plants. It's almost like a pet. But its response is only one. You touch it, it folds up. There are no variety of responses. Bacteria can have a little bit of response, but it is mostly at a molecular level. So what we know again is that in viruses we do not have as much of response, but they can, upon in contact with the host cell, they can start injecting their DNA or the genome into the host cell. That is the only response they do get. As far as my knowledge goes, plasmids and viroids do not have any responses. But again, with viruses, it's at the molecular level. With movement, you will see that humans have movements, animals, we are animals too, and plants have movement, gradual, but there is movement, like in the mimosa plant I just described a little while ago. And bacteria do have chemotaxis, some of them at least. They have a flagellum because of which they can move from one place to another place. Viruses cannot move by themselves, majority of them at least. Plasmids do not move, and viroids do not move, especially when they are outside the host cells. Reproduction, yes, humans reproduce, animals, plants, bacteria, and viruses also are capable of replicating or forming more copies of themselves. So do plasmids and also viroids. And adaptation, if you look at which is almost like evolving or some kind of accustoming to the situations. Either it is voluntary or it just happens. It is a debatable one, but animals, plants, majority of them do have adaptive responses. Viruses do mutate, and so do plasmids and also viroids. So if we see any of the most common things, or as an objective of life, if you see reproduction seems to be the objective of life, right? And it is also then should become a part of the definition that something, when we call something as living, it should be able to reproduce or replicate. So then if we say reproduction is very important to call something a living or non-living, then how do we refer mule as? Mule is a hybrid which is born between a horse and a donkey. And mules are very strong and used well, but they are actually sterile. Consider an old woman who has passed the menopause and she can no longer give rise to offspring. Would you still call that living or non-living? My apologies, it's just an example of talking about it. It could be an old man who is no longer able to give rise to new offspring or is not fertile anymore. So is the case with the seed. A seed is living only or can show the properties that we have discussed when it gives rise to a new thing. What if the seed has never got a chance to germinate? Would we still call it a living thing or non-living thing? These questions are between or within the purview of philosophy. So we can still have a working definition. And that definition is the one common thing that is present in all. As we described before, the common thing between all of them, all the organisms, all kinds of organisms, is that they all have replication or reproduction, and they all have adaptation. These are possible if only there is genetic information. And if we look at all these types of organisms with different levels of complexity, then they all contain genetic information. There is a difference within the list that I have given before. I would rather call them propagating entities. And that propagation is possible because there is genetic information. So, how do we say a living cell has genetic information because of which it is the manifestation. The cell is the manifestation of the genetic information that is present within itself. And let's just, for fun, compare it with computer virus. A computer virus does almost the same things as we have discussed. It has information to multiply and spread from computers to computers through the network ecosystem of the internet or other networks that we can see. They're almost similar, except the living cell we can see, and the computer virus we cannot see. And a computer virus is an artificial thing. Okay, I'll quickly summarize, and before I summarize, I would also want to bring your attention to one of the most or the best definitions that I have come across, and which is in line with what I have actually discussed. I came to a conclusion that the definition should be something like a physical manifestation of the genetic information. That's life. Because majority of the scenarios do agree with that. So I googled my verbatim, and I found a good hit on this. This is from Professor John Blemire from CUNY. It says every living organism is the outward physical manifestation of internally coded inheritable information. I think that comprises a lot of things for me. I mean, the NASA's definition of life has something like it should be capable of Darwinian evolution. But I don't think we need to have that component. Anything with internally encoded genetic information, and which is the physical manifestation of that information, is life. So quickly to summarize, the one common property seems to be reproduction for all kinds of organisms. Those that don't reproduce will go extinct. I think that's easy to comprehend. Then for us, our objective of life, what is the objective of human life? For reproduction, of course, is one of the objectives which we agree or we don't agree. So that becomes a kind of biological objective for normal people. And there is also, we have an additional social objective where we try to do more and better so that the coming generations will benefit. And there I end, and I hope you have enjoyed the definition of life. Thank you very much.